Hi, I'm Claire Milliken, and welcome to episode 149 of Art This Week. In this week's episode, I visit the Amon and speak with Rebecca Lawton about their exhibition, To See as Artists See, American Art from the Phillips Collection. Now for Art This Week. Hi, I'm Claire Milliken, and I'm here with Rebecca Lawton, the curator of painting and sculpture here at the Amon to talk about their new exhibition in conjunction with the Phillips Collection. And thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So can you just tell us a little bit about this collection and how it's a good fit with the Amon and just a little bit more of a history of what the Phillips Collection here is?
Well, it's a great opportunity for us to create a kind of courtship, you might say, between the great paintings, the great American paintings that are embedded in the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., which is a very unique museum, not unlike the Amon Carter Museum. And because we're just devoted to American painting, we thought that bringing our two collections together in a kind of dialogue, one which would create this moment where you had the highest concentration of American painting in this region that had ever happened, and then two, that we would be able to have conversations between the paintings that are in our collection and the paintings in the Phillips collection. And while there's some synergy between works by, say, Georgia O'Keeffe and Stuart Davis, there are also a number of artists in the Phillips collection that aren't represented in our collection. So it is a great opportunity to introduce our audiences to artists that if they don't know, they should. And if they do know, they should see the works in the Phillips collection.
So can you tell us a little bit about the title of the show, because it's To See as Artists See, and what's kind of the meaning behind that, and how can you see that in the paintings that are on display?
That's a great question, and it has to do with Duncan Phillips himself, his approach to collecting. And it is truly what makes Duncan Phillips unique as a philanthropist, as the director of a museum, as a collector, because what he thought he needed to do was he needed to spend time with the artists, with the living artists, in their studios, talking and looking about art. And from these exchanges with the artists, he gained a perspective of how artists see. And that was one of the engines that drove his activities as a collector. He was always looking to what made human creativity unique, these voices, and how they come across in the visual arts.
So can you give me a little bit more information on this Jacob Lawrence series and just the relevance and the importance of it to the Phillips Collection and also to, American art history as well?
Happy to, because one of the pilgrimages that we make to the Phillips Collection is we go to look at the Migration series, of which they have 30 of the 60 panels. The Museum of Modern Art has the other 30 panels. And what's critical about this series is that it tells the story of the African American experience through the eyes of Jacob Lawrence, who, although he did not make the migration from the southern states to the north, his parents did, and many of his relatives. So growing up, he heard all of these stories about how the family arrived in New York and what they encountered living in the South, and their travel north, and then as they became a part of a community in these northern states. It's a very, very moving series. It's done with an economy of means, and interesting enough, Lawrence conceived of the series as these panels, all of the same size, but of different orientations, and you see it here. Some are horizontal and some are vertical, but they're the same size. And what he did that is absolutely fabulous was he conceived of the whole entire series at once. He chose the narrative, he chose the colors of the tempera, and then he schematically created the series by painting each panel in sequence, but not finishing each one. So, for example, what I mean by that is wherever he had blue in the series, he knew throughout the whole 60 panels that there would be blue here. So on each panel he painted the blues, he painted the greens. So the whole series came together in this interestingly cinematic way, and then he sort of poured everything he knew about the experience in it. And when it debuted at the Downtown Gallery in 1941, it put Jacob Lawrence on the map. This is the panel number 3. And to me, it's one of the great panels in the series because you see this family cohesive as a unit in this great pyramidal structure, which is great stability. And they are moving north. And the sense of their freedom is expressed by the birds flying freely in the sky. And so there's this wonderful kind of mirror effect of these people grounded and the birds taking flight.
All right, so I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about this amazing Richard Diebenkorn, about how Duncan Phillips wanted to create this conversation throughout time and throughout nationalities, and just how this piece is so relevant to when it was made, but also to how it was relevant to things that happened before it. So if you could just give us a fuller picture of what this amazing painting means.
Yes, this is an incredibly powerful Richard Diebenkorn. It's called A Girl with Plant from 1960, and its subject is a classical subject in art, the woman seated in the studio before an open window. But of course, what Richard Diebenkorn could do with this theme is rather extraordinary, and one of the first things that we notice about it is his palette and the use of this blue and green pigment, and that comes right out of Henri Matisse's work. And what's a marvelous story about Diebenkorn is, as a serviceman, he was stationed outside of Washington, D.C. and frequented the Phillips Collection and was immersed in their collection and was very familiar with their painting by Henri Matisse of the studio window. And that image stayed with Diebenkorn in a way that turns out years later, 40 years later, less than 40 years later, really 20 years later, to be this extraordinarily powerful moment in his art. But when you see the picture in the flesh, you realize the richness of Diebenkorn's brushstrokes and how he plays with space in such an interesting way. It is a painting that is at once very flat and rectilinear, but at the same time, as you become absorbed in it, you see that the space start enveloping. And you try to read the forms in space, and everything that Diebenkorn has done here challenges your perception. And so in a way, you had asked about the theme of the show being to see as artists see. And when we look closely at a work like this, Diebenkorn's study of the art that came before, the masters of modern painting that he wanted to emulate, you see these moments, you see these ideas of connection to Henri Matisse's work, for example, but then you also see the beauty and the power of Diebenkorn's voice as an artist and the way he handled paint in a magnificent and very monumental scaled piece.
We want to thank Rebecca for speaking with us. More information on the exhibition and museum can be found at cartermuseum.org. More information on the Phillips Collection can be found at phillipscollection.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.